Welcome back to Crushing Canaan. I'm Seth Varnadore, joined by my brother, Pastor Nate Varnadore, for another episode this week. Last week we began talking about a resurgence in Christianity, I think, in terms of in pop culture.
Mm-hmm.
I did want to ask this week's quickly answered question as we in a second, we'll continue our series on Christianese. Today, we'll be talking about the 10 Commandments. So, kind of continuing our series on things you learned about or heard about as a kid, for sure, or you hear about discussed kind of in passing, but maybe don't understand the context of it, or maybe if pop culture is taking over more than what's actually in the Bible. So, we're going to get to a biblical understanding of the 10 Commandments, which you are actually doing as a series in church.
Yep.
So if you want even more 10 Commandments talk after today, you can check out his church's YouTube page for that. But I did want to begin today. So we talked last week a little bit at the beginning about Christianity and pop culture, and how there seems to be somewhat of a resurgence.
Yep.
So I went back and listened after we talked about that to Wes Huff and his appearance on the show Flagrant, which is not a PG podcast, I would say. So some of our I don't think many of
there's Rogan. So I mean,
yeah. So there's a few, but this is a little bit more let's say crass. They don't it's comedians, so they're not really, nothing's off limits. Yeah, nothing's too reverent, right? So but it was an interesting conversation because there was kind of a cavalcade of different people there, some that were didn't seem super interested at all, some that seemed interested, some that were Christian, but I think one thing that seemed to get caught up, and this is on my mind this week as well, just for personal reasons, but I think there's a common misconception that baptism equals salvation.
Yep.
That it's like the last check mark, that once you're baptized, you're going to heaven no matter what.
No, there's some that believe that.
So I wanted you to just kind of talk about that quickly here at the beginning.
So I'm gonna give a real quick. That's a whole other episode in itself. Just putting that out there. There are some that believe that you're not saved till you're baptized, and then you have other camps who say no, baptism is a sign of salvation. The little saying that you'll get is it's an outward side of the inward change. That's what you hear a lot.
Our church calls it going public.
Yep, going public.
Yeah.
Some will say unashamed. You get it's similar to communion. That's another hot button issue amongst churches. Well, if it says profess, be baptized, is that required for salvation? Well, it's very touchy in various camps. You get some that believe in two baptisms, that you're not really saved until you have two baptisms, baptism of the Spirit, baptism of immersion. You get some who say that the physical public act doesn't save you, but it does. It's you denying self and showing the world that you are unashamed. You're going public, as your church would say, in the gospel, that you've been saved by Christ and your life is now going to be reflective of that. And so it becomes an accountability act as well. That's what we partake in. You have some that do full immersion. You have some that sprinkle. You have some who believe in you baptize your children. The Catholic Church, some Presbyterians and Methodists, they believe that you baptize your children as they are saved, entered into the covenant of the family. There's whole different interpretations that go into it. And it is, in some areas, depending on your view, it is a secondary issue. You do have some who, like, for example, that would adhere to the two baptisms for salvation. That's an issue that, those of us who would say, no, that's not that. Separation from that. It is a hotly debated topic And many of them have their valid points to it. But I think what it ultimately comes down to is, does baptism go to the believer, or does that go into the believer and his family as well? And there's good arguments on both sides. It's credo baptism and pedo baptism. That's a whole different thing. That's not a quickly answered question.
No.
But my belief personally is the act of baptism is an outward side of obedience, but it's not necessary for salvation. It is an indicator of salvation. That is my personal belief on that.
Yeah, that's kind of my thought as well. It just seemed so as we're talking through kind of Christianity, these guys, that I don't think had dealt a lot with it and talked with many like true Christians, it seemed like they were really wrestling with the thought that I could do whatever I want and then get baptized and then I'm good, and I can do whatever I want after I get baptized. So what I was kind of, and they didn't really make the case that and it's hard, you're on those shows for 4 hours, so it's like, you're not gonna nail every single thing, but to me, the case is, I've always heard you use the term a heart change. Like, there should be this, to me, and I do like the phrase "go in public." This is you saying, "Hey, this is what I believe, and now judge me by these standards." Now, basically,
yes,
I should be living up to these standards, and if I'm not, then am I really changed? Am I really a believer? If I'm not, if my life looks the same exact as it did before, then so what? Then what is it?
The term you're looking for is regenerative heart, a heart that's been reawakened, a heart that's gone from death to life. If you're the same person today that you were before you claim faith, you're missing the point. So, like I said, we can go. I think
that turns a lot of non-Christians off.
Absolutely.
When you discuss it, when they think, oh, I can just be a bad person, and if I just say, you know what, I believe I'm getting baptized, and then if some people kind of agree that, well, baptism is it, then you could just continue to be a bad person.
Well, look, I think it's best for us on this topic. We'll have to jump into that, a different one. But
okay,
this does tie into where we're headed for today. Ultimately, when you do that, you're saying, I'm giving my life to God and I want him to change me. I need him to fix me. And you are no longer putting yourself at the center of your salvation. A lot of people, when I've done a couple of funerals and it breaks my heart. They've never set foot in a church. They've never had anything different. They look like everybody else in the world. But one of the things that, they were baptized when they were 6, 7 years old, so they're good.
Yeah.
And you do realize it's more than just you putting yourself in the center of your salvation and it being an act. So when you say, I did a thing and I did good by the world standard, you're missing the point. So it does tie into where we're headed today, talking about the 10 Commandments and the law.
Yeah, so let's make that transition. So this may be a topic that we flesh out later, because I just there's something, as I'm listening to this long conversation, I'm like, I feel like they're getting stuck on this, and there's an explanation. So I just wanted to get your take on that as well. And we did have a baptism in the family this week, so that was on my mind as well.
Very exciting.
Yes, my oldest daughter got baptized, so correct. That's good stuff. So, all right, so let's move on to the 10 Commandments here. So you were doing a sermon series on it. And I was listening to you this past weekend, and it kind of popped in my head. I'm like, oh, this is one of those things I think that everyone's learned about, everyone's heard about, but we don't know the whole story behind it. So I thought we could get there today. So the 10 Commandments was directed by Cecil B. DeMille and stars Charlton Heston, and Yul Brynner. I knew that would upset you, but all right. So
I'm about to be like Shaq throwing my papers up when Charles Barkley says something. Oh, come on, Chuck.
But so let's talk about the Ten Commandments. Interesting. So I was I didn't even realize this part of it. I don't know if you did either when you were starting your sermon series. Maybe you did. Apparently, within the past few days, they voted in Texas to possibly allow the Ten Commandments to be displayed in all public schools. So, so I guess that is it's still,
while also erecting a huge statue.
Well, it used to be outside.
A lot of things happening in Texas.
Interesting. It used to be outside a lot of court. I think you can still see it in some places outside courtrooms. In certain I think there's some certain counties near Citrus County we used to live where you may see the Ten Commandments still. But so let's talk about the background of it. So I think everybody just remembers the tablets, things like that. So where did you start when you were kind of getting into this for your sermon series? What was kind of the starting off point for you?
So originally how it began was I tried to focus on since I've been here at this particular church, I've always felt it's wise knowing that summer is going to have certain inconsistencies. You know, you got people graduating, you got people moving. And we're surrounded by a lot of colleges and whatnot. It's weird. We live in a heavy commuter. We have military. So we have a lot of transient, and summer is chaotic because it's the one time a year where most people are able to go on vacation. So it's very in and out, a lot of moving parts. So what I do is I try to focus on a summer series. And originally I was going to do the Sermon on the Mount. I was going to focus on Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. And as I was really praying and researching it, I found, we know it, but as you research more, Jesus is essentially expounding on God's standard of the law and people's understanding of the law. And at the time of Christ, the Pharisees, Sadducees, the high leadership in Jewish culture had over 600 laws in place. And every single one of them was a deeper expounding on the Ten Commandments. People were screwing up so badly or playing the gray area so badly in God's law that they had to keep like noting. And how do you do that? Well, I found myself just going, you know what? We could take the whole summer and just expound on the Ten Commandments because it's found throughout the whole Bible. When God establishes this law, even leading up to it, you see that a lot of these things God has done and enforced and spelled out. And so a lot of times we see it, and what we do with the Ten Commandments is we automatically put ourselves in the center. And some churches have taught this. I know when we were growing up, there was this belief that the Ten Commandments was how the ancient Israelites lived to be saved. That's not what it was. That's not what the Ten Commandments were. Again, it's not about putting yourself at the center of your salvation. God gave this law to reveal his standard, and so that we could be reflective and acknowledge that we need a savior, that it is impossible for us to follow these completely. And so he goes, the best way for me to do it is say, here are 10 things. And what's really amazing about it is when you look at the 10 Commandments, the first 3 are direct man to God, man to God, man to God. And the other 7, man to man, person to person, how we are to view and interact with each other. And what Jesus later reveals in the Sermon on the Mount, he would say, you have heard it said, do blank, but I tell you, if you've done this. And of course, people are hearing that and their minds are blown because they go, we're screwed. We're screwed. When he says things like, if you even look at a woman with lust in your heart, you've committed adultery. And all the men probably listen to that are going, oh, great. God's standard is vastly different than man's. Man will dilute and dilute and dilute until we create enough gray area that we do whatever we want. Think about this. In the Garden of Eden, what question did the serpent ask Eve to get her to fold? Like what was the question? Do you remember?
Not off the top of my head, I think.
He simply
said, "Is that what God mean?
Did God really mean that?
Yeah.
Did God really mean that?" And so, think about today. When we look at the Ten Commandments, and I'll get to them in a moment here, and I'll give a very brief. But when you read it, how much of it do you, in your mind, trying to find a gray area when it's way more concrete than people realize? So
I don't think there's a lot. Like, to me, there's not a lot of looking through them. There's not a ton of gray area. I think
there is. I'll trust me. Let me go through it real quick. Let me go through it. I think it's easier because I keep saying the law and I keep saying I got to remember this. We do this,
and we don't have to get all of it in today. This may be one that extends a couple weeks, but I do want to get. We can obviously read through them, but I do want to get the background a little bit, why it was necessary, all that kind of stuff,
right?
And then we can go. This may be one where we go a little bit deeper in the coming weeks on this one as well.
And quite frankly, we'll need to. But I think it's just wise for me to put out there, and I'm giving brief note. Like, first one, no other gods before me. Second one, no idols. Third one, do not take the Lord's name in vain. Remember the Sabbath. Honor your mother and father. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness. And then you shall not covet. Okay. You and I can sit here and go, oh, yeah, that's very concrete. But really? I mean, I just expounded this past week on when God says no other gods before me, there is a Hebraic understanding that we miss out on. Because you and I could sit here all day long and say, yeah, we believe in one God. We believe in God. We believe in God. I don't worship some other pagan God. I don't try to. So, yeah, I'm good. I follow that command well. Well, really, is your full dependency on God? Or do you have to have something with God? So for some people, it's money. For some people, it's career. If you have to be relying on anything but God, you have another God. But the actual translation, you guys can go listen to my sermon last week about it. But here's a sneak peek of it. Before me, the Hebraic translation, the literal translation means in my face, to my face. Okay. Talking about an intimacy of looking somebody in the face. If you love somebody, and I use the visual of my wife, if I'm looking at my wife's face, it's a very intimate thing. If I'm looking in her eyes, it's very intimate. I'm awkward. I struggle with that. But if I claim I love her and I'm like, hold on, and I try to look at something else.
No. The guy,
the intimacy, the focus is off, right? Yeah. But how many people sit there, again, the gray area, I don't believe in another God. Well, it's not, it goes beyond belief. It goes to knowledge, knowing, and living, right?
What rules your life.
Exactly. And so God sent these things down. And the misconception is, it's how people were able to live before they got saved. That's not why he sent it. It's not why he sent it. As a matter of fact, in Exodus 19, so Exodus 20 is where we read the 10 Commandments, the law is given. But in Exodus 19, the chapter before, God is preparing Moses, and he's like, look, you gather your people, you get them ready. I'm about to give you this. I'm about to give you these commandments. I'm about to do these things, and you will enforce this. This is my standard amongst them because I have chosen them to know this law. And this is what will set them apart. The culture at that time was what we call polytheistic, meaning multiple gods. People were worshiping multiple gods. And probably the most prominent one at that time was Egypt. There was numerous gods. And so they had a god of the Nile. They had a god of fertility. They had a goddess for this. They had a goddess for that. You name it, they had a goddess for it and a god for it. God is saying, no, My people, I am the lone God here. I've chosen this nation to live to my standard, to learn my standard, to that I have freed, that I promised. And he's talking about from the time he made this promise to Abraham, long before Moses. I made this promise to Abraham that it would be his descendants that will go on and represent me. And so I am giving them this information. I'm giving this information because this is what's going to set them apart from everybody else. This is going to be the conduct and character that my people will know me by, and they will make others known. Totally different than this is what you're going to do every day to be saved. That's not what it was about. There's a little saying, the only thing you brought to your salvation is the sin that you need to be saved from.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so it's why in this system, it was supposed to be reflective. It was supposed to be the thing that you looked at and went, oh, I fell short. And then Jesus comes along, fast forward many, many, many years later, and he expounds on this, not because it was a secret, because he says, you need to understand that God's standard is vastly different than yours. You need to understand that this is how God views adultery. You define adultery this way. And so you had defined murder this way. God views murder this way. And it's deeper and it hurts more than we realize. And this was not supposed to be about shaming people into salvation. It was supposed to be reflective of, I don't have it all figured out and I'm not perfect. I was not born good. Mm-hmm. I fall short of these things. And so when you view it in that light, the 10 Commandments was sent as a tool. I've heard one pastor say it is the mirror that God puts in front of us to remind us of our brokenness that he can fix. So it's hard. It's a tough pill. But Jesus beautifully expounds on this.
Well, I think the interesting part of and that those terms are like you said, when you look at it initially, you're thinking this is very black and white.
Mm-hmm.
This is easy to do.
Right.
This should be an easy 10 things. If you tell me 10 things to do or not to do, yeah, I can not do things all day long. Like that's easy for me. Yeah. So it is interesting that right on the surface, it's 10 things, super easy. But you realize that these 10 things can be more difficult than you think, especially when you get into how Jesus spoke about them. So the simplicity of it is kind of makes it kind of more interesting to discuss.
Yeah. So even Jesus, there's a couple things that Jesus points out about the law, about the 10 Commandments. He comes and he says, I have not come to abolish the law. I've come to fulfill it. See, like right now, Seth is, he's heading out to speak to his dog the way God lashes out at Moses. It's pretty great right now to see his frustration. Oh, good. I was just talking about you. I was saying you're talking to your dog like God talks to Moses. It's great.
Yeah.
No, but
smited.
So Jesus would simply say, I have not come to abolish the law, but I've come to fulfill it. Meaning that he has come and he is the only one who has lived the life to fulfill these things, but it's not abolished. And so when you kind of going back to the question you have, people go, well, I'm saved, therefore I can do whatever I want because I'm now a walking blank slate. That's not what that means. That's not what it means at all. As a matter of fact, the closer to Christ you become, the more of the law you are able to fulfill, or the more you understand it or have a conviction of. If I look at the term adultery, you and I both know today, the word adultery means to cheat on your spouse. That's what we view it as.
Mm-hmm.
That's the best translation, literal translation we get is adultery. When really adultery in the eyes of God is anything that involves sexual sin. It's a wide blanket.
Mm-hmm.
So when, things like, well, if you looked at another woman with lust in your heart, and obviously the men are the ones hearing this right now, women are hearing it too. So guess what, ladies, you're not off the hook. It applies to you as well. But the understanding is any of it is displeasing to God. You've broken one of his commandments. And for the men in here, and maybe some women, let's say you're addicted to pornography. Well, Jewish culture right now, today, Dennis Prager actually just said this. He, about a year or two ago, they were asking about pornography, and he said, well, as long as you don't act on it, it's not cheating. As long as you don't act on it, it's not cheating. Where Jesus openly goes against that. And you got to remember, Dennis Prager is Jewish.
Mm-hmm.
So Hebraic understanding very much falls into, you can think it, just don't do it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But Jesus says, no, don't even think it. Like, if you think it, you need to repent of that. Like, you don't honor that. That is God's standard. And I mean, you think about things like, man, it is impossible.
Yeah. Well, I think right. And my lovely dog distracted me before I could make a cogent point last time I spoke. But the simplicity,
House is out of order.
He is an idiot. The simplicity of
the one PETA listener just dropped.
The simplicity of the Ten Commandments and the inability for you to follow them reinforces very well that you need a savior and you need salvation, right? Because if you can't do these 10 simple things, which on the surface seem very simple, if you cannot do that, then what else, what other sins are you committing, right? So I think they work because I feel like some people think that, Jesus, he's supersedes the 10 Commandments. We don't need them anymore. But it's like they kind of work hand in glove and kind of reinforce, the simplicity of the Ten Commandments reinforces the need for a savior. I think it's interesting. And it seems so, on the surface, seems so easy to do, but really, it's not.
No, not at all.
So if you can't do that, you need some help.
Yeah. Well, sorry. Now my wife is texting me.
Get your house in order. All right.
Fine. Yeah, I know, right? And we're done. Cancel the show. The visual to give is, it's almost like, imagine the Titanic is sinking. Imagine the Titanic sinking, and Jesus is the lifeboat. And you decide, I can swim. It's just water.
It's cold, brother.
But I'm going to jump.
Yeah.
Because I'm capable of swimming myself. I'll figure it out. Give that lifeboat to somebody who actually needs it. Yeah. Guess how many of the people that did that survived? None.
Zero,
right? Like that. It's like, you do realize that water is Arctic, right? You do realize it's cold. You do realize that, what's going to happen. But we would look at somebody who did that and say, how dumb are you? But that's what we do. That's what happens. And God sent that law to remind us of that, to remind us of his standard, remind us of who we are, remind us of who he is, and ultimately to stop and go, I can't save myself. It keeps you humble. Any Christian, anybody who claims that is arrogant and braggadocious, it's one thing to be confident, but it's another thing to be self-centered. There's a reason, and I heard a pastor say this one time, what letter is in the middle of the word sin? It's I. If you put yourself at the center of it, then you've missed the point. And the law is supposed to remind you and keep you humble of, we are humans that fall short. And so that's why God in Exodus 19, he's talking to Moses, he goes, I have chosen this nation. They are to be holy and set apart from the rest of this world. And these are the things that will be of them. And Jesus would later say, if you've broken one commandment, guess what you've done? You've broken them all. And so some people hear that and they go, "Oh no, I'm damned. I'm screwed." That's not the point. The point is, if you really acknowledge that, you're going to be changed. Your demeanor is going to change. I know a lot of people that are self-righteous, like they are capable of saving themselves. And, I had somebody say, and they mean well. And it's a dangerous trap a lot of pastors fall into. You'll hear, "Oh, pastor, that sermon was amazing. We are, we need you, and this is what you do." And I just go, please give God the credit. Please, anything good that happens, give him the glory for it. Because you have to do that, because anything good like that is of God comes from God. We read in Ephesians that wisdom comes from God above. And so you want to be wise. You want to be humble. You have to, because if not, guess what God's going to do? Don't be surprised when he smacks you upside the head to help you align with those things that you claim you are. It's one of the reasons why so many churches are discredited today, is because when it boils down to it, how many of the 10 Commandments do they actually do? Now, let me make this clear again. The law does not save you. The law reminds you that you need to be saved. Grace is what saves you. And so the distinction that I've heard best given is law alone is pharisaical. Okay, that's legalism. Law alone is legalism. That is you saying you better every day. Your works is what saves you. But grace without law is liberalism and progressivism. So you go back to, well, I'll just do whatever I want because I'm covered in grace. I'm covered in grace. Well, you need the law to understand the significance of grace. Mm-hmm. If I don't know the ship is sinking, then why do I care about the lifeboat? Right? Yeah. Like you sit there, I'm on a boat. Sounds like that could be a song. But anyway, there's these people get caught up into that, and you need both. You need the law to remind you of your brokenness and how far from God you are in his standard, but then you have grace that reminds you of that his salvation is that much sweeter. And so you have the two together, and it's a great balance. But the law does not save, grace does. But guess what? If you have grace, if you really are covered in the grace of God, you're going to look at yourself first before you look at others. You're going to remember where you're screwed up. And you use that as a testament to share with people of the goodness of Christ and his grace. You need both. Some churches are so caught up in grace alone and don't even acknowledge the law. Well, that's an Old Testament thing, but you're missing the point of the very thing that Jesus speaks of in the Sermon on the Mount in numerous times. What they need. The Pharisees, they were upset that Jesus on the Sabbath healed a crippled man. They were upset. You worked on the Sabbath. And Jesus kind of looks at them and is like, "Hey, idiot, I am the Lord of the Sabbath." Hello. Like, again, Trinitarian language. Yeah. But what's happening here is he's pointing back to that guys, God sent that to you, and none of you can fulfill it. None of you can. And some people would say, well, that's why they did the animal sacrificial system. Well, we also read later in the Minor Prophets, I believe it's Amos, God speaks through Amos and makes it clear, you're doing these sacrifices, but you have no brokenness. You have no change. You're just doing it because it's essentially insurance for you. It's fire insurance. No.
It's like, I don't know if you saw this week, Chet Hanks had like a Bible and then like 3 other like religious texts laid out in front of him, and people are like, what is he doing? And somebody said he's the mummy. When the mummy comes back in the movie The Mummy, the guy holds up different necklaces. It was like that. So
yeah,
So, finally, we're gonna get more in depth on, I think, in the coming weeks on this, because I do think it's like I said, it fits in our series here of Christianese. But I did want to get right at the very end here. Two things. First thing, why do you hate the Ten Commandments movie so much?
I don't hate it. I don't hate it. I was just wondering when you would actually break the reference out.
Immediately.
True. Okay, so true story. My father-in-law probably wanted to kill me. We were watching it. It's a long movie. It's over 3 hours. By the way, what a great movie for sets and special effects.
220 minutes.
It holds up so well. So my daughter,
I've seen the full thing. I gotta watch it.
Oh, it's great, yeah. But I get this way, and I got to keep myself. But my father-in-law was about to punch me in the face. I'm sitting there going, "That's inaccurate." I became one of those people, and I shouldn't have.
The book is better.
The book is so much better. Maybe you should read that instead. But no, I'm watching it, and my daughter's like, "Dad, did that really happen? Dad, did that really?" So I find myself just getting, no, yes, no.
And we will talk about the plagues of Egypt one day. That is happening.
You are stupid excited about that.
I do want to talk
to me about it. I'm like, well, we'll get there.
Yeah. So, second question. Did you know that Cecil B. DeMille had another movie called The Ten Commandments?
Did not.
In 1923. Silent film. So, they're not just remaking movies nowadays, folks. Cecil B. DeMille had two versions of the Ten Commandments. So,
wow.
There you go. Wow. Hollywood's out of ideas. They're remaking the Ten Commandments already. They just made it in 1923. They're making it again in 1956. Unbelievable. Now, the first one was a silent film, so, and they didn't have Charlton Heston there. You can take that staff out of his cold, dead hands. So,
why?
All right. So, thank you guys for listening. We'll be back next week to go a little bit more in depth on the Ten Commandments. Nice background, I think, today, and why kind of it's still relevant. Like we were just talking that they're still talking about putting them up in courthouses. It's up in classrooms, things like that. So it's still relevant to this day. So good background information. We'll get more in depth on those in the coming weeks. If you got any questions, you can ask us at BibleContextMatters.com, at Crushing Canaan.
Please on Twitter, send in questions.
CrushingCanaan@gmail.com. We did get a question from our good friend Jeremy Bennett, and he asked which Exodus plague is your favorite, and I said we're going to get there. I'm working on it. So
why is this? What? Jeremy Bennett from Bennett's Bodega?
Correct.
In the link. Hey, and I've been approached about another sponsor. Let me explain how this works, everybody. We've just gotten to a point that if you give us one free thing from your business, you're considered a sponsor.
A partner. True partner.
My daughter came up to me and said, "Dad, you smell nice." I said, "Thank you. That's the Florida Man Beard Balm from Bennett's Bodega."
There you go. And that takes a lot to get a compliment from a daughter. So,
well, yours at least.
Of a certain age. It can be tough. So,
well, we're at that age now where I look at mine and just go, "What do you want?"
There you go.
How much money? What do you want? I'd like some. There it is. I'd like earrings. Like some jewelry. No.
Yeah, we're getting there. So, all right, we'll be back next week with more Crushing Canaan, more Ten Commandments talk. BibleContextMatters.com, Crushing Canaan on Twitter, CrushingCanaan@gmail.com. Thank you for listening. We'll see you all next week.